Looking to see if we can Periscope
Listening
this.
to the news on RTHK.
I should pay attention.
More turbulence. The economic statistics.
A triple-dip recession.
Collapsing commodities.
Monetary policy has to do the heavy lifting work.
Money for nothing.
Yeah, okay. Good morning and welcome to Friday's Money for Nothing with me, Renita Malhotra Hora. U.S. stocks rally on the back of the Fed decision. Greece stumbles towards a euro exit as yesterday's Eurozone meeting ends in rancor. And Asian stock futures track the U.S. rally as the dollar fuels commodities. Yes, Greek fatigue definitely seems to have hit the masses. That's Eurogroup leader Heren Dijsselbloem speaking at a news conference in Brussels yesterday after the Eurogroup meeting failed to come up with a resolution on Greece. Well, we'll talk more about that with our markets commentator, Sean Darby of Jeffereis. And then it's Focus Friday. And today we focus on design and creativity with the Icicle Group's CEO, Bonnie Chan Wu. Tobias Hekster joins us as guest host today. Good morning, Tobias.
Good morning, Renita.
Tobias, is it too late for Greece?
Unbelievable. These guys have been able to grab defeat from the jaws of victory. When you are in debt and people are starting to make concessions, you do not throw abuse at them. And you do not continuously mention a 70-year past war. Now it's going to get really tough. They're going to call this meeting on Monday. If they start to become slightly polite, to become slightly adult, they might have a chance. And otherwise, Varoufakis goes in history as he's great in game theory, but I don't think he progressed past snakes and ladders.
So if they become slightly polite, is this all about manners?
It's Europe. We talk, and the idea has to be everybody knows that Germany's going to pay. But if you annoy them much enough, they might, if they're politicians, they also have constituencies. If you screw them over too much, they'll just go for it. In the end, we can cope with a Grexit. We're not certain, but be nasty enough and people are going to take the risk.
Well, you know, speaking about manners and sort of being polite, yesterday pro-government lawmakers walked out right before the end of the vote. This is right here in Hong Kong. Of course, this paved the way for an overwhelming rejection of the government's political reforms. What do you make of that?
Yeah, it was interesting. I just heard the comments over the 8 o'clock news. It must be unfortunate what the pro-Beijing people tried. But in the end, if you play these kind of games, know the rules. Otherwise, you look like an amateur.
You do indeed. Well, in Europe, as you said, the Eurozone finance ministers have ended emergency talks without agreeing on how to resolve the financial crisis in Greece. At the meeting in Luxembourg, Athens came under further pressure to accept reforms and avoid a debt default later this month. But the Greek government has refused to consider big cuts to pensions. Now, Greek Finance Minister Yanis Varoufakis did put forth a proposal. Eurogroup leader Heren Dijsselbloem says that there is no chance that the Greek government will receive any financial aid before its euro bailout expires.
Feel that an agreement must be credible. It has to be credible from the perspective of sustainable finances and economic recovery in Greece. But it also needs to be credible from a point of view of the credibility of our monetary union and the Eurozone as a whole. We think that is still possible, but if such an agreement is, in the coming days, put to the Eurogroup, if it were to be reached, we would that the credibility both for Greece and for the Eurozone as a whole.
The European Central Bank plans to hold an emergency session of its governing council on Friday, that's today, to discuss the deteriorating liquidity situation of Greek banks. Euro area leaders will also hold an emergency summit in Brussels on Monday to try and force a settlement on Greece after finance ministers' efforts failed miserably yesterday. Well, in the U.S., stocks rallied, boosted by Wednesday's Fed statement that rates would probably rise gradually. The Nasdaq powered to a fresh record, easily topping the prior all-time high in a broad rally that withstood signs of the Greek debt default. impending. The Nasdaq closed up 1.34% at 5,132, more than 25 points above the May 27th record. The Dow Jones closed up 1% at 18,115, while the S&P 500 rose almost 1% to close at 2,121. In Hong Kong, as we said, politicians on both sides of the political reform issue are asking what's next after the government's proposals were voted down in the Legislative Council by an unexpected landslide. Hong Kong shares slipped 0.2% yesterday, tracking losses across the region, despite the fact that the U.S. Federal Reserve said that rates would rise gradually. And Shanghai tumbled on liquidity concerns. Here's what Wells Fargo's advisor's Paul Christopher has to say.
To think of as an investment culture. It's more of a culture of building. And when they need liquidity and they can't pump it into the banks or they're afraid to, they might just let the stock market run for a while. But that's a really a poor substitute. They're not really controlling or managing very well.
All right, let's bring in our first guest of this morning, Sean Darby, who is a Chief Global Equity Strategist at Jeffereis. So, Sean, what would you say is the contagion fear of all of this, if indeed there is a fear of contagion?
The PBOC's finally moved away from a very tight policy. Remember, overall monetary conditions, fiscally, currency-wise, monetarily in China are as tight as anywhere in the world at the moment, probably even more so than Brazil. So there's a lot of ammunition that the authorities can add into the system in order to relax conditions. I suspect we won't get that type of contagion effect. What you're seeing is being a very weak level of growth, and that's because, as I said, it's deleveraging the debt and deleveraging growth in the system, and that's going to mean it's going to be very hard for companies to grow out of their debt problems unless they can refinance through the stock market or through some other mechanism.